You know, this don't make no damn sense. It doesn't make sense when a landlord has the audacity to like close a lease out, and that same landlord had made two people sign a lease to split the rent in a 2-bedroom apartment. But if one of the roommates chooses to move, to another location, and then the landlord doesn't even get in contact with both of the roommates at the same time to give consent to close the lease, that doesn't make no damn sense. Because if one roommate chooses to stay in the 2-bedroom apartment and the other roommate leaves, the landlord can't close a damn lease. The landlord cannot do that. The landlord cannot close a lease if one roommate chooses to stay in the apartment and the other roommate, is choosing to leave. The roommate, like, bro, the landlord cannot close the lease. That doesn't make no sense, because it would seem as if like making two people sign a lease for nothing. You know what I'm saying? Like, bro, like that don't make no sense. Like one person, like one roommate signing a lease and the other roommate signs a lease. Bro, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if one person was a so-called co-applicant, co-signer. If they've been splitting the rent, those two are roommates. If two people have been splitting the rent, like, come on, man. Like, there's no reason why a landlord is supposed to be closing a lease if one roommate is choosing to stay and the other roommate is choosing to leave to another location. That doesn't make no damn sense, because, man, there's so many landlords that have closed so many leases out in the globe. There's so many landlords that close so many leases on two people where one person was choosing to stay in the apartment and the other person, was wanting to move to somewhere else. Like, a landlord is not supposed to close a lease on two people unless two people have agreed to move to another location. Like, so for example, like if I had a roommate and me and the person both sign our names on the lease, and the landlord and one of my roommates chooses to leave to another location, and then the landlord just chooses to close the lease without my consent. If I choose to stay in the apartment while my roommate chooses to leave to another location, and the landlord just chooses to close the lease, that's not fair. That doesn't make no sense, and that's illegal. That is illegal. Because, like, how in the world can a landlord make two people sign a lease for 1 year in an apartment, and then when one person chooses to move, then person number two chooses to stay in the apartment, but then the landlord be like, both of you has signed a lease to be in the apartment for 1 year, but since one of the roommates is leaving, since one of the roommates is leaving, even though you had chose to stay in the apartment, I'm gonna have to close the lease. Like, that's some fucking bullshit, bro. That's some fucking bullshit for real, man. Because, like, what would be the whole point of making two people sign a lease for an apartment? What would be the fucking point? What would be the damn point to have two people sign a lease for an apartment for 1 year? And if one roommate chooses to leave to move to another location, and then the other roommate chooses to stay in that same apartment, the landlord has no right to close the lease. Because, for one, if I have a roommate and we sign a lease for 1 year, and then they choose to move to another location, and I choose to stay in the apartment that I signed a lease on, the landlord has no right to move me. The landlord has no right to move me out of that apartment, because, like, I chose to stay in the apartment that I'm leasing, and, like, that's just illegal. That's just robbery. That means I've been played. that means I've been played. Like, what the world, man? Like, come on. That don't make no damn sense. It don't make no sense. It doesn't make no damn sense. Like, come on, man. I'm gonna say it again, bro. Like, if a landlord had made two people sign a lease for a 2-bedroom apartment, and then one of the roommates chooses to move to another location, and then roommate number 2 chooses to stay in the apartment, and then the landlord be on some fucked up ass hoe shit, want to be on some, oh well, since one of the roommates are moving, we're gonna have to close the lease, even though we did not get consent from roommate number 2 about moving. Like, if roommate number 2 chooses to stay in the apartment that they signed a lease on, and roommate number 1 chooses to leave, roommate number 2 should be able to keep the apartment. These landlords be on bullshit, man.